Invincible Season 4 doesn't just raise the stakes in hype and visual spectacle, it drags the story into deeper darkness and a kind of contradicting dread that makes Invincible one of the most unique superhero IPs out right now. It wasn't a perfect season, but it's easily one of the most emotionally impactful. By the end, so many of our favorite characters are left in harrowing situations that force us to rethink how we see them entirely. Every character is forced to grow up, dealing with the consequences of loss on all sides of their lives. And the season's team-ups and cosmic collisions only highlight the elevated threat the story presents. Despite all the fantastical elements, the emotional weight of everyone's choices never gets lost. Invincible has always asked both its characters and its audience one central question: what does it mean to be a hero? And to me, no season of this show has answered that question in a more complex, varied, and interesting way than this one. But this season makes something very clear. Heroism isn't defined by strength, it's defined by how one confronts their own failures. I'm going to structure this video by power scaling each character, the one thing Robert Kirkman for some reason is terrified to do with his own story. So logically, we have to start with our post-traumatic stress waging king, Mark. What power can't change. A through line of Invincible storytelling is that Mark is going to get his ass beat. And that doesn't change this season, but where last year gave him a foe like Conquest, Season 4 gives him threats that force him to question his purpose entirely. He faces Dinosaurus, kills an abducted human, almost kills Titan, saves the devil and his kingdom, joins the coalition of planets, slays Conquest, and destroys Viltrum. And none of these choices are straightforward. None of them let Mark see his heroic journey in any clean or comforting way. By the finale, Mark is carrying the weight of everything he's seen, done, and barely survived. And then he comes home to the woman he loves, only to learn she went through something incredibly dark and challenging, all on her own. The scene where Eve reveals she was pregnant is written beautifully, because Mark not only would have stayed for her despite the galaxy at stake, but if he had known and still left, it raises the question of how effective he could be out in the field, knowing his partner is dealing with their choices without him. Mark is trying to process the impossible. How am I a good hero if I'm not even there for my partner or my baby? If I die out there, what happens to the people I love? And after facing Thragg, the scarier question becomes, can I even protect the people I love? It's the most defeated, but also the most humble Mark has ever been, and that humility sets him up to grow further than ever before. We finally have a Mark who's willing to do whatever it takes to save the world, or more importantly, his world. Even if the actions he has to take hurt his pride, his ego, or his old idea of heroism, none of that matters anymore. The only thing Mark wants now is to stop the damage happening around him. It's a satisfying place for his character to land, especially for someone like me who's always found Mark's philosophy toward being a hero a little counterproductive in this world. But I'd be lying if I said the way he gets there feels triumphant or that the destination looks anything like I expected. Mark's struggles aren't over. And with where the season leaves him, like Eve said, whatever comes next is going to hurt worse than anything before it. But the beauty of Invincible is that Mark isn't alone. He's supported by so many people, and his choices throughout the show, even when they're naive or childish, have the power to influence the worst people to be a little better. Even someone like Mark, who is far from the best hero, can still have that kind of impact on the world, despite everything he's fighting through. Though Mark's powers matter, they're not really what make him invincible. It's his connections, his heart, and all the intangibles that have pushed him the furthest in his journey. And if Mark's arc shows the limits of strength, then Nolan's arc is about confronting the limits of redemption. What power can't heal. Nolan's journey from season 1 to now is genuinely remarkable. Not perfect, but easily the most complex version of the evil Superman archetype I've ever seen. One of the most surprising developments in his story is his friendship with Alan, someone I originally expected to be closer with Mark, but the dynamic between Alan and Nolan has grown into something meaningful, and it adds a lot of emotional context for where Nolan is right now. Joining the coalition of planets was a brutal choice, especially when you're siding with someone like Thetis who killed billions of your people, and seeing Nolan's backstory with his parents gives so much insight into why he left Earth in season 1 instead of completing his conquest. The mercy his father showed him on Viltrum planted a seed in his conscience that slowly bloomed over the 18 years he spent raising Mark. Even though Nolan resisted joining this war, he inevitably does, to protect his sons and to avoid adding more grief to Debbie's life, even if he has little control over that. His slow attempts to rebuild that bridge with Debbie are selfish, but they also highlight a man finally discovering his own autonomy. He called her a pet because that's what he was taught to believe about inferior species. But both confrontations he has with Debbie show someone fighting for what he now believes matters. At first, that was the revitalization of his world. Now it's about protecting the world he adopted and its inhabitants at any cost, to make up for the lives he took, and to fight for a life he knows he may never get back. After destroying his own planet to save Earth, moving forward is Nolan's only option. But ironically, that means facing the past he betrayed. His conversations with Art and Cecil show exactly what his struggle will be for the rest of his story. You can't take back what you did, even if you've changed, grown, and look back with deep regret. To many people, all you represent is pain and loss. As Nolan continues to grow, he moves through the stages of grief, not for someone he lost, but for the person he used to be. I love that when he speaks to Art, he genuinely thinks things can go back to what they were. It's the first stage of grief, denying that his reality has changed irreversibly because of his own actions. His conversation with Cecil showcases the second stage, anger. Nolan is frustrated that his place in the world isn't acknowledged, even by one person on Earth, because he knows what it took for him to get there. But no one else does, and no one else should have to consider his journey when deciding whether he's worth redemption. Cecil has his own skeletons that would change how everyone views him, but even with that, Nolan isn't given respect or appreciation because to most people, Nolan isn't a person, he's a monster. The reason Debbie and Nolan's first conversation feels different from the second is because of the gift that keeps on giving, Oliver. One of my favorite characters, even if he doesn't have many victories and many fans find him annoying. I think his heart is undeniable. Nolan bonding with Oliver and earning his love, which is admittedly easier than earning the hearts of Earthlings, gives Nolan a sense of self-respect he hasn't felt in years. Connecting with his son pushes him to fight for Debbie's respect, even if he can't fully earn it. And that's where the third stage of grief comes in, bargaining, attempting to regain control or make deals to reverse the loss, often accompanied by guilt. Nolan is trying to negotiate with a past he can't undo, hoping that if he shows enough growth, enough honesty, enough vulnerability, he can reclaim even a fraction of what he destroyed. He speaks from a place of understanding his faults, but he also refuses to deny the good parts of himself, forcing Debbie to confront the fact that she did know him, even if he pulled the rug out from under her. It's not manipulation, and it's not delusion. It's a man trying to reconcile the version of himself he was taught to be with the version he's finally choosing to become. Nolan's story seems like it's heading toward a very obvious direction, one that if I'm honest feels a little heavy-handed for how nuanced the series usually is. Nolan and Debbie will most likely end up together, and I assume his redemption arc will end with praise and appreciation for his service, but I prefer the idea of his redemption ending with his own understanding of himself, even if that respect never comes back to him. It's not only more realistic, it's more inspiring. A person can change for the better for themselves, and the world may never fully accept it, but that doesn't diminish the value of choosing goodness anyway. Nolan and Thragg are two sides of the same coin, men trying to fix what's broken, but one is haunted by their own choices, while the other carries the burden of his empire, what power can't fix. I'm Team Thragg, and I'm unapologetic about it. He's probably the main reason I wanted to write this script in the first place, and even though I expected a little more from him earlier in the season, this show has always known how to make the Viltrumites far more layered and interesting than you'd expect with the limited screen time they get. The moment that defines Thragg is when Argold, the former Grand Regent of Viltrum, asks him if Thetis is a traitor. Thragg says no, and that single answer directly leads to Argold's assassination and Thragg's rise to power. Becoming Grand Regent is probably the biggest mistake of his life, and he carries that responsibility in a heavy, almost depressed way. At first, the way he carried Argold's skull felt strange, but by the end of the season, it makes perfect sense. Thragg does it because he feels like he failed him. He didn't prevent the death of the man who brought Viltrum into its golden age, and the moment he takes the throne, Thetis releases the Scourge virus, wiping out 99.9% of the Viltrumite population. Heavy is the head that wears the crown has never made more sense to me than watching Thragg suffering. Despite all the power he possesses, looking like a Freddie Mercury Saiyan, he can't fix this with brute strength or tactical brilliance, and that's what makes his conversation with Nolan so telling. Two men from the same world, one sees Viltrum as a graveyard, the other is still clinging to the history of a thriving planet. After Nolan, Mark, and Thetis destroy Viltrum, Thragg crashes out, rightfully so, and kills Thetis, and honestly, there was zero way he was surviving this battle. Thragg almost kills Nolan and Mark too, but in a moment where he could have sealed the Viltrumite fate, he chooses to think ahead. letting Mark and Nolan drift into space until they meet again. The reason why Thragg does this is connected to the scene when he speaks to Nolan. Thragg is asking for him to surrender, not because he sees their side or has empathy for Nolan's evolution. He insists on a different outcome because Viltrumite life being lost is his greatest burden. Even during the Great Purge after Argyl's death, he locks himself in the kingdom until it's over. He can't even face what he's asked them to do for the sake of their people. Thragg is a character who feels unstoppable in every way. Easily the greatest threat Mark and company have ever faced, but what makes him such an interesting character and one that fits perfectly into Invincible's world is the complexity of his struggle. Everything about him, his power, his status, his royal presence, were paths chosen for him by Viltrum from the very beginning. Thragg, like Conquest and Nolan, is a prisoner of Viltrumite ideology. They may see humans as weak because we can't fly or tear someone in half on command, but the one thing we share is the feeling of being trapped by the world we're born into. What separates Thragg from his Viltrumite peers isn't just his strength or speed, it's that he doesn't see himself as a prisoner of a dead empire. He sees himself as the hero who can restore it. He believes he can rebuild Viltrum's order and spread its philosophy across the galaxy. And even though he carries that responsibility with pride, there's no joy in it. It's duty without fulfillment. Comparing my two favorite characters in this entire series, Conquest and Thragg, is night and day. And that contrast is fascinating. Conquest looks maniacal and revels in bloodshed, but underneath that, he feels drowned by his purpose, with no real sense of who he is, longing for connection even if it's twisted. Thragg, on the other hand, may appear empathetic or remorseful at times, but those emotions are part of the strategist in him, tools to complete his goal. At this point, it isn't even about revenge, it's pure, inevitable world domination in his head. Two monsters inverted in how they are seen by their people and how they view their own destiny. Thragg shows us the end point of power, a man who can destroy worlds but can't save the one thing he wants, his home. Which brings us to the last question this season forces on every character. What does a savior even look like in a world like this? Savior. The final conversation between Thragg and Mark is one of the best scenes in the series because it builds on every season finale that came before it. We feel the dread Mark is carrying, not just because of Thragg, but because as an audience we've been conditioned to expect finales drenched in blood, guts, and despair. But Thragg, just like in the previous episode, shows why he's such a unique villain not only in Invincible, but in superhero media in general. Thragg presents a truce. The remaining Viltrumites will stay on Earth, breed, rebuild their ranks, and save their people. Mark wants no part of that. And at first he reverts to his most childish instincts, fighting a battle he can't win, complaining instead of compromising. But eventually he accepts Thragg's offer, because refusing it would mean the destruction of Earth and everyone he loves. Throughout the episode we see how deeply Mark loves Eve, by how much it devastates him that he wasn't there for her during the pregnancy. It's his biggest regret. Even though he was fighting for the galaxy, he almost pulls a classic Spider-Man, breaking up with the person he loves for their own good. But Eve pulls him back to reality. She reminds him she's a hero too. She fought Conquest with him, and being together is worth more than being apart. I bring all this up because the tragic beauty of Mark's acceptance is that Eve is the main catalyst for why he says yes. She's the last image he sees before agreeing to Thragg's terms, giving the Viltrumites, space Nazis if you ask Cecil, the chance to grow on Earth will not end well. But for Mark, it buys him time to be with the woman he loves, even if the cost is unthinkable. Mark chooses love over victory, even if it costs the world, and that leaves us with the question this entire season has been circling. Does that make him a hero or a savior? If you ask Thragg, the answer is yes, even if it's reluctant appreciation. He tells Mark, the universe is strange. In a way, you've become our savior, willing or not. Mark's response, what have I done, lands with the weight of someone realizing the scale of their choice. Thragg pauses, turns back and says, you have saved the lives of every living thing on this planet, before flying away. In that moment, Mark earns Thragg's respect, not because of the Viltrumite blood in his veins, but because he had the maturity to think beyond the fight in front of him. And ironically, Mark ends up doing the one thing Thragg has been trying to do all along. Save his people. Thragg has the strength to kill every character we've met in this show. He could destroy Earth by himself if he wanted, but all he's ever wanted is to preserve what's left of Viltrum. And even though he presents the conversation like the outcome was inevitable, he's still surprised by how it plays out. In the end, both Mark and Thragg become saviors for the people they love. but everything comes with a cost, even if you can't see it yet. This final conversation as the season 4 finale shows how much this story has matured. It's reaching a level of moral and intellectual complexity that forces you to pause as a viewer, even more so than before. I haven't read the comics, but I assume we're heading into a time skip. I want to see how the Viltrumites adjust to society. There are only 37 of them, and they won't all make the same choices. It's the most excited I've been for Invincible in years, and that's because of the conversation that ends this season. So, what is a savior? Someone who fights knowing they can't win? Someone who learns from their mistakes and tries to make things right? Or someone who carries a responsibility bigger than they can hold? I don't know, but I do think heroism in Invincible is deeply subjective. And when it comes to saving, what's beautiful is that these characters ultimately choose themselves instead of the greater cause. Mark accepts Thragg's terms because he wants more time with Eve. Nolan keeps chasing Debbie even after the door has been slammed in his face again and again. And Thragg chooses to stop fighting a war he inherited, refusing to kill the man who destroyed his planet. In the end, even if they couldn't save everyone, all three of them saved themselves from falling deeper into despair, reaching for a happier conclusion, even if that happiness is only a personal victory. I'm excited to see where Invincible Season 5 goes. Thank you for watching. I'll be back again. Peace.